All right, everybody. Welcome to PubKey. I want to thank our guests and our sponsor, the Human Rights Foundation. This is our monthly. We're going to be continuing the Freedom Tech series. Tonight, we're going to be talking about AI. Harrison runs the AI track, and we have Alex from Goose, codename Goose, Block, like there's a lot of things you can explain. As always, this is meant to be a tavern chat. If anybody uses a technical term of art that you don't quite understand, or if you want to double click on an issue, feel free to interrupt politely, or it depends on them how polite you have to be. But it always goes better with crowd participation, and we're going to have a demo, and it's going to be fun. Guys, thank you everyone. Oh, and free beers. Thank you to Fold, just launching their credit card. If you need a beer or a snack, just tell them to put it on the Fold tab, and we'll take care of it. Thank you. Tip your bartenders.
Thank you. Okay.
Test.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I think we'll start off a little bit differently this time. So just curious, like show of hands, who here, we'll start it off simple, uses AI on a fairly frequent basis? Okay. Now keep your hand up. Who here uses open source AI? Okay. And keep your hand up. Who here uses open source AI to vibe code or as an agent to actually do things for you, not just write? Okay, so as we can tell, we're very much on the forefront of something here. If you have used open source AI, and especially as an agent to vibe code something, you'll be aware of like the power and the importance of it and what it can do. It's sort of like you were saying earlier, it's sort of like being on the internet in like the late 80s or early 1990s, like you see what's coming. And so I'll just briefly introduce why is the Human Rights Foundation we're interested in this, and then I'll hand it over to Alex. Alex, maybe if you want to introduce yourself first on like what you do with Goose and how you think about these things.
Of course. Yeah, I'm Alex. I am a software engineer at Block. So Block is the parent company of Cash App and Square and Tidal. So we have a few things going on inside the company. And specifically inside Block, I work on a project that we open sourced that has now moved to a foundation, a neutral foundation under the Linux Foundation. And the project that I work on is called Goose. And I think this stopped working.
Okay. A little bit of a mic issue if we're able to fix that.
Test. Turned it off and turned it on again. Test? Okay. Very good.
Yeah, maybe if we could
I'll
turn
make it louder a little bit.
Alex's mic up a bit.
Sounds good.
Yep. And so, key to that is open source. Why is the Human Rights Foundation we're interested in this? Is because our mission statement is to support political dissidents in authoritarian regimes. And one of the number one things a political dissident has to think about is their privacy. And you don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, if your privacy is being protected if you can't actually read the code that's being written. So that's why the transparency of open source is important. And it also gives access to everybody. Like there are those in authoritarian regimes who maybe they can't afford an expensive ChatGPT or Claude subscription, but if it's code available for free online, that makes it a lot more accessible to them. So we could talk about this all day, and we will talk about it for an hour or two, but we'd rather show it to you first so you get a sense live what it can do. So without further ado.
Yeah, sounds good. I can start with a demo. I am going to put the mic down because I'm going to use both my hands to control my computer. So hopefully people can hear. Yeah, we're good. All right. Mic drop. All right, so I'm going to pull up. Hopefully this works. All right, perfect. Yeah, so I'm going to pull up Goose. So this is the project that I work on. This is a project called Goose, and it's an AI agent that can help you build things. And I'm going to take an idea from the crowd, so I'm not going to put my own idea forward about what we should try to have it do. So, floor is open. Like, who has an idea for what we should try to get it to build? It usually does a pretty good job with like websites, mobile apps, that kind of thing. Anybody have an idea?
How about an interface to book a party at PubKey?
Okay.
A private event.
Okay. this run. And while this starts, I mean, it takes some time to run, right? So I'm just going to talk generally about. Okay, perfect. This is great. So you can see what it's doing. Like it's taking in. This is like chat that you're familiar with if you've used any other AI application, right? But what this is doing is it's running some software on my own computer to basically do software development, right? So it has a set of tools that it's connected to that it can analyze the requirements that I've given it, and it can look around, and it can make a plan, and then it can go and actually write the code and run the software project for me. So we'll see it continue to work, and it'll take maybe a couple minutes, but it should, with any luck, get something going for us that we can start from. Yeah, so you can see what it's doing. It's like writing, it's doing what a person would do if you gave them that knew how to write software. It's doing what a person would do, right?
Yeah, so we can come back to this in a few
we'll give
minutes
it a minute.
when
It's-
it just interrupt us when it looks ready, and we'll see the results and what we think of them in a couple minutes. But big picture, the difference between this and the traditional way of making something like a website is, hiring a web designer, maybe interviewing them, getting a sense if they're good, giving them instructions, waiting a business day for them to get back with clarifications, etc. Here you give a prompt, and then we'll see a few minutes later you have a website and you can iterate from there. So this is like basically the simplest example of what you can do with agents and vibe coding in a matter of minutes, and then the more technically capable you are, you can create apps, platforms, etc. So here's the website.
Yeah, so here's going from that idea to this being done in that amount of time with just the model connected to the right tools to be able to do software development. This now exists, and like it's not perfect, right? And there are probably things that if we played around with this website, we would find them like, this is broken, this doesn't work, this isn't how I want it to be. But then fixing that and getting to a place where it's exactly what you want can just be, going back and being like, okay, yeah, I like this, but fix this thing, change this form to have this information, hook it up to my Google so that every time somebody signs up, I get like an entry in a Google spreadsheet or something. And as you connect it to more tools, it can do these things. Yeah. The question is, can I explain the concept of tools and what that entails? So the couple technologies behind this, I'll start big picture, and then I'll kind of like zoom in and talk about the details of how it actually works. So there's a protocol called the Model Context Protocol. You're familiar with other protocols and other forms of technology like HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. The way that you can think about these protocols is like the protocols in the early days of the web, right? Where these things are emerging. You've got this like fundamental new piece of technology like the models, the AI models that exist now. And we're starting to put protocols around them so that different bits of software can communicate efficiently and over a standardized format for how an idea should be communicated, that an action needs to be taken or a file needs to be written to. And so there's a protocol called the Model Context Protocol, which has emerged in the last year. And basically tools are like actions that the model can take, right? So if you have maybe your example is like a Google Drive tool, it's like create spreadsheet, search spreadsheet, filter spreadsheet. Those would all be tools. And then the model can send back tool call requests with the right arguments to efficiently let that happen. And then our job in the project that I work on is like, we connect the model to the tools. So the Goose project that I work on, that's what it does. Yeah.
Could you touch on the privacy components? Like when you think about Bolt or Lovable or some of the more mainstream interfaces for similar outcomes, is this running the model on your device itself? When you say it's open source, can you manipulate the weights of the model? Like, can you just touch on the open source part and also the privacy component in terms of what's getting done, processed on your computer versus getting routed through cloud servers or third parties?
Yeah, fantastic question. And there's a couple things going on. So The Goose part is the agent, right? So the Goose part is the actor that takes input from the model and goes and does things, calls tools, and takes action. And our whole project is open source. So it's a software project that's on GitHub, publicly available source code, fully open. Like nothing we have is closed source for Goose. It's all fully open, and it all runs locally on your laptop. So you download Goose, either you download this application that I'm showing here, or the CLI. We have a command line as well where you can run Goose and you can do the same thing in a terminal, right? And you can say hi and you'll get answers from Goose. Those are both open source implementations. And then in terms of models, we are neutral. So basically we have all of these, and you can also do custom ones. So if you have like a different way of connecting to an AI model, whether it's local or hosted somewhere else in somebody else's cloud or whatever, you can connect to any of them. So Goose is completely neutral to any model. So it's like free, local, open source, model neutral.
And just a follow-up on that, when you say it's free, you say it's model neutral?
Yeah.
Are you free to access all the open source models versus partnering with,
Yes.
say, an OpenAI where you
Correct.
can buy tokens and charge?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a way of connecting to Anthropic or OpenAI or any of these models through GitHub or Databricks or anything, and those are like various paid products that you would have to have an API key for.
Yep.
But the Goose part is free. So it's an implementation of an agent that is free.
So just to frame this for the layman, I know I get the sense we have a technically well-versed audience here, but for the layman, basically, if you have a question for ChatGPT, you can just ask ChatGPT. But if you want ChatGPT to code you something, it's not very convenient to ask it to write you the code and paste it somewhere else and have it interact with the files on your computer. So this is what you would use Goose for. And you know you can rely on Goose to do what it says it's going to do because its output is all open source. You can literally read the code, and you can either ask another AI to check the code for you. You can ask a software developer too, so it's very transparent. And because it's transparent, it protects people's privacy because you know whether or not it's giving anything away you don't want it to.
So I'll stop mirroring.
Yeah, and this is, we do encourage questions, so if there are any more questions, Rick, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, so
We got a mic there.
yeah, so I came in a little late. Is Goose an open source model?
It's an open source agent. So it's an open source thing that lets you connect to a model and then have it call tools and do actions for you.
Okay. Does it rely on other models? Does it rely on a specific model out there in the world, or
Any model basically. So you
it's
can,
like a plug and play kind of thing?
yeah, to anything, like to any way of like locally running an AI model, an open source one or a local one that you have, or a hosted one by any of the major companies. Yeah.
Okay. Does it turn out to be effectively like an implementation of MCP that wraps a certain model or connects to a certain model, and then you can plug it into any other APIs that you need?
Yes. Yeah, so it's an MCP. Goose has an MCP client in it. Like we implement an MCP client,
Okay.
and then you can connect to many servers are the things that expose useful behavior, right? So like I don't know, like your bank might have a MCP server, an airline might have an MCP server one day where you can say like, just book me a flight and I don't care, you know, like I just want you to do it for me. Like that would be possible through something like Goose, because an airline would have an MCP server. Goose can seamlessly connect to that MCP server, and then you can kind of combine multiple together to do really powerful things, right? So you could have like a hotel booking system accessible via MCP and an airline booking system, and then you can just say like, make me a trip, do everything for me, right? And that will come pretty soon, I think.
Okay, and would that be like each individual server? Would there be like a different model or a different MCP agent at each terminal? So like the airplane client, because I got airline booking is always the example kind of brought up.
Yeah.
Would that be like each provider of a service then implements MCP as opposed to implementing a website? Because everyone right now implements. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, all right, fair enough. Like right now, everyone implements, I guess, TCP clients, HTTP clients by default, whether through Square, whatever. Would this be effectively like a new market of technology, people trying to implement MCP so that agents can interface with all the tools?
Yeah,
with whatever it is your service is.
It's the early days, right? I think the really exciting thing about this moment is like we've had a fundamental technology shift under our feet, right? Where we have the models are like the big advance for everyone, I think. And then now we're in the early days of trying to figure out like, holy shit, now that we have this amazing thing, these models that are so smart and so capable, how do we connect them to all the other things that we want to connect them to do useful and creative and fun and amazing things with them? And so MCP is like a first attempt at that, right? And the way that it works in MCP is many people have servers. So like United Airlines will have a server, and PubKey will have a server, and everybody will have MCP servers. And then there are a smaller number of clients in the world, and the clients are like the apps that you will use on your phone or your laptop or whatever to interface with this stuff. But this is just how it's starting out, and I think the exciting thing about this time is like we all get to decide how it's going to work, right? Like this is the one that we get to be part of. This is the revolution and the big change that we all get to shape. And so the big reason why we have Goose as open source and why we feel so passionate and excited about that is like we want the world to decide how this stuff works and how these tools are going to serve us, right? That's why we have Goose open. That's why we take code from anybody who wants to come and contribute code to Goose. It's one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but that's how MCP works. But that's not necessarily how all this stuff will work, because it's going to keep changing, and we're all going to keep making it better, right?
Totally. Andrew, did you have a question?
Yeah. So, Harrison, this question is actually to you and the human rights activist and dissident world that we've been introducing tools like Goose. And I'm just sort of curious, like, who's picking this up and running with it? Who are the activists who are like really making good use of this in your view?
Great question. We have a couple activists that are vibe coding with agents, hopefully open source. We'll have to check in and provide education to those that aren't and encourage them to use the tools that protect them the best. We have an activist, Farida, who works on the Free Togo movement, and she's fighting an authoritarian regime in Togo, and she's raising awareness in like a variety of ways about both the crimes the regime is committing and also like what life in the country looked like beforehand. She vibe coded a virtual museum where you can go through the history and you can see sort of start to finish like how this regime took over. And then she vibe coded another website where it's a call to action to get involved and be a part of her movement. And this is something that she was able to do in like a matter of days, like really fine tuning it and making it exactly her vision as opposed to a matter of weeks or months that would have otherwise taken her. And we're doing a hackathon soon in Austin where we're going to be pairing activists with developers. And basically activists will come with their problems and developers will come with solutions that they're building with AI in a way, even like you tell me like 1 or 2 years ago, developers might not have been able to iterate this quickly with them, but that's changing quickly.
Certainly not.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to get back to open source here because we've sort of covered the importance of vibe coding and your agents and what you can do with it. But how would you frame the future? Like, it's hard to project far outwards, but say like 5 years from now, if this is open source versus all closed and ran by central companies, like what's the risk we run, or one versus the other?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, so we have a really big opportunity at the beginning to try to make sure that some of the important parts of how these systems work are open and are governed in open organizations, right? So last week, we announced a change where Goose started as a project at my company. I work at Block. It's a private company, or it's a public company in the US, but we donated Goose to a new foundation under the Linux Foundation. So the Linux Foundation has been around for a long time, hosts a lot of open source projects. Basically, it's a place to send a project to ensure that it remains neutral and not controlled by any individual private company, so that it's more of a public good, right? It's like an open project that can be shaped by anybody. Anybody can come and influence its direction if they get involved enough and they work on it enough, right? And so we donated Goose. Anthropic donated the model context protocol that I was talking about before. And OpenAI donated something called the agents.md format, which is how you give an agent instructions about how to do something. And I think this is a good step, and it's like what we need to see more of, right? Because the thing I worry about, if the important parts of these technologies stay inside individual corporations, is they will, like the first thing is they'll just be incentivized to try to use it to make money, right? And there's commercial software. Obviously, commercial software will stay around and will have a role in the world, but like the core pieces of how this works, if we get ourselves into a situation where private companies control those pieces, then it's like the whole thing will be built on a backbone that is controlled in a governance structure that people can't influence, right? So I think the more that we push protocols, software, implementing the key parts of how these systems work into a setting like a foundation, and it's open source, it has a governance process that's open, the better, right? We can build on open standards and have interoperability between solutions. And it's like, there are echoes of the beginning of the web, right? Because if you think about HTML, HTTP, those technologies, TCP that became core to the internet growing, like the web might not have worked if there weren't multiple companies building different browsers. Like if you didn't have Netscape and you didn't have AOL and all those people kind of competing to build the best way of browsing these things, it might just not have worked. There were kind of versions of the web before that didn't work because they were proprietary. So I think open source is both just sort of good in terms of making sure that the world at large can shape these technologies, and it's also maybe necessary for it to succeed.
Absolutely. And from a freedom aspect, go ahead, you had a question?
Yeah, just a question to tie this into HRF and helping dissidents in authoritarian regimes, for instance. From a privacy standpoint, does each user have their own account and every single instruction they're giving the model or what they're trying to achieve, is it sort of stored and tracked by these? It sounds like OpenAI's got a piece of it, Anthropic, yourself, and then could that regime, I don't know, subpoena one of the entities and try and track down the information about who the dissident is and persecute them?
Yeah. Versus,
I forget if it was an HRF event, but there was a open source AI model website, ppq.ai. The founder was here. And when all the queries go through that, there's no personal identification associated with the account. And all the API calls, I don't have a technical background, but they all just show up as coming from PPQ. So it's like 100,000 different anonymized inputs going in and inputs coming out.
Yeah, they anonymize it, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out, when you tie it to HRF longer term, is there any risks from that privacy component?
Yeah, so this goes back to the principle that we have in Goose of being model neutral, right? So Goose runs on your own laptop, and in terms of our storage of your information, like it all happens on your laptop. So we have a local database that's like bundled into the Goose application, basically just so you can have session history. You can like look back and see your past interactions, the chats that you've had with Goose, the things you've done, but they're on your laptop, so they're not going anywhere. And then how you connect to a model changes it dramatically, like what your exposure to something like that is, right? So we have completely local models where you can run against a local open source model from Goose where nothing will leave the machine that it's running on. It's obviously like the most kind of air-gapped and the most secure. And then we have ways of connecting to the popular models of the world, like OpenAI, Anthropic, like those are also possible in Goose, right? And at which point you are using those models at the terms of service of the thing that you're connecting to, whether that's Google or OpenAI or Anthropic. So it kind of just depends how you choose to use Goose. But our goal is to make any way of using it possible.
Absolutely. And so I guess backing up for a second, like, what made you interested in this to begin with? When was that? And like, what has been your experience with it so far?
Yeah, I got the opportunity to start working on this project a little over a year ago. I started working on it in November. I was doing something else at Block, and they borrowed me to do some coding on an early version of Goose, and I was like so blown away with it and doing the few weeks of work that they had me do that I was like, I have to find a way to keep working on this because it's just, I don't know. I think zooming out more than just my project, I think we are truly at like a transformational moment for technology. I don't think these opportunities or like these kinds of shifts come around very often. I think there's like the personal computer, the internet, and this. I think that's like a line of 3 changes that have occurred in society, and I think it's like fair to put this change on that list. And so the fact that we get to all be here for when this happens and shape how it happens and what we are all able to do with these tools is like tremendously exciting. Also scary in many ways, but. Yeah.
And just to highlight what a seat change this represents, you talked about a hackathon you were part of a few weeks ago where there was like a no keyboard rule. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, we had a fun event called the No Keyboards Goose Hackathon where the idea was for people to build things without touching the keyboard. So like touching the keyboard to activate the like microphone, the dictation input or whatever, right? But the goal was for people just to build something with Goose without ever laying a finger on their keyboard. So it really underscores like we can all make software now. We can all make digital things. Doesn't even have to be software. Can be media, can be video, can be images, can be any kind of modality that's digital. Like we can all make this stuff now without even touching our keyboard. And we got some really amazing submissions of projects that people had coded up just by kind of like pressing the microphone button and talking to Goose and telling it to build stuff, which is fun.
And I think that really emphasizes the seat change you're talking about, where it seems like a year ago we might have said we're 10 years away. A couple months ago we might have said we're a few years away. Now I don't know how close it is, where you can essentially tell a computer to do anything, and it'll just do it. And it seems like increasingly flawlessly.
Yeah, I mean, software production is just completely changing, right? Like software production used to involve like hiring a team of expensive software engineers, and this is just like increasingly individual people can produce more and more and more. I mean, there's all kinds of problems and there's all kinds of things we'll have to work out, but I think it's real murky, like what the future is going to look like as it relates to software. But I think there's just going to be a lot more of it, and we can all expect that it's going to be a lot better because so many more people can create it and can go from having ideas to things existing in the world, which is really exciting.
And that's also what makes me love the work you're doing with bringing open source into it, because that's sort of, in this context, synonymous with bringing freedom into it. Like 5 years from now, we could live in a world where, you know, they're doing valuable work, but at the same time, they're centralized, closed companies, and they control all of this, and you're totally reliant on them to finish any project you want. And from the human rights perspective, dissidents are reliant on them, and those companies might have the best intentions in the world, but when an authoritarian regime knocks on their door, like, we need this information and this information, otherwise it's going to be a problem for you. How many of these companies will turn down China? Yeah, go ahead. And so before you ask your question, Ryan or Rick, we're really at a pivot point of like, how will this technology form? And the fact that you're doing it the right way and making it all open source is like very heartening to see. If a handful of individuals weren't doing this, it just might not happen. So it's really, like you said, like the time to shape what's going on. Anyway, did we have a question?
Yeah, 2 directions. I can go technical or I can go political. Any?
A little of both. Give us a taste of both.
Well, then I'll start with technical, because is error propagation one of the biggest problems or concerns with is error propagation one of the biggest problems or concerns with like agent action so far?
Try holding the mic a little closer.
Hello?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, wow. All right. It's really just like, okay, yeah. Is error propagation the biggest concern for correct agent action through time right now?
Could you break that? Would you want to break that
Error
question down for the
propagation-
layman?
Yeah, like is error propagation of the nature of the problem that makes...
I can take a stab at it just
Yeah, go
based
for
on
it.
that. So,
But explain the question first for us.
Yeah. So the question is about error propagation and whether error propagation is a way to make agents perform a lot better. We did try something really interesting that is in Goose now, where if you're using Goose and an error occurs anywhere in the application, so like, you know, we've all been using software and it's like something went wrong, right? And you're like, great. Like sometimes the software gives you an opportunity to do something about that, and sometimes it's just really frustrating and it doesn't, right? When an error happens anywhere in Goose, we did build a little feature that we thought would be cool to try, which is like, instead of like a close button or something, we put a thing that can just like copy the details of the error and send it back into Goose so that Goose can work on it. And we've actually found that like sometimes Goose will actually like look inside its own source code and find the problem and fix it. And so like when an error happens, sometimes we look at it and then we like do the send to Goose thing. And then we go to read the code as software engineers to try to fix it. We go read the code and we see that like a solution has already been put there by Goose, which is kind of crazy. So yes, it is a way to get them to perform better. Whether it's the biggest problem, I don't know. There's lots of things to solve, but.
Okay, what I meant by, I guess, biggest problem, or I mean like most persistent, is like the error propagation through like multiple chains of communication as well. Just is error propagation of the nature of like a problem that comes up, or is it largely solved?
When you say error propagation, are you referring to like software errors or some kind of other error?
I'm referring to all kind of errors. So
Yeah.
you can like precision read errors from instruments or transmission errors. Like TCP is lossless. So I'm basically asking, is like losslessness one of the core features, or is losslessness one of the core causes of the problems plaguing agents today?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
I think the problems are at a much higher level. So I think
Good to know.
Yeah, I think the problems are like, how do you give the agent context on what it's supposed to do? So you can think of this like a person, right? Like if you bring a new person into something that you're trying to work on or into your life in some way, and you give them a task, if you don't give them enough information, they're probably not going to do a good job, right? Like you tell somebody like, hey, the pizzas need to be picked up at 6 o'clock, and you don't tell them where the pizzas are going to need to be picked up from and where they need to be brought to, like they're not going to accomplish the task, right? So agents, when you scale that up to like more complex, like things that you're trying to do as you're working with an agent on your own computer or on your mobile phone, it's a matter of giving the agent the right context, but also like not too much. Because if you tell somebody, it's also like a person, if you tell somebody a million things and then you ask them to do a task, they're going to get overwhelmed, and they're probably not going to use all that information effectively. So figuring out like the right information to give to the agent at the right time so that it does a good job of whatever task you're asking it for, I think that's the biggest problem. And it's a much higher level problem in the technology stack, right? It's more of like a philosophical problem than it is the technology itself.
Yeah, okay. And I guess the second leg of that, if anyone wants to take this, they can, but the second leg of that was open source developers. You're effectively pushing off Goose, the responsibility of maintaining Goose onto the Linux Foundation. Linux Foundation exists in order to economically support like open source projects, but there isn't a good economic incentive to make good open source projects. Or like if I have unique code, I can make a business, build up a moat, and then personally benefit, and then have a lot of stuff, or I can give it to you all for free, and then I don't have anything.
Yeah. So this is a common like thing that comes up when you hear about projects getting donated, right? And I think donate is actually a really bad word to use. It like doesn't communicate accurately what happened. Because what we're actually effectively doing with Goose in moving it to the Linux Foundation is we're going to keep working on it, and we're not stopping. Like we're maintaining it still. The people that have been maintaining it are going to continue to be like the core maintainers, but the hope is over time that it makes it easier for people that don't work at Block to also become core maintainers of it and stewards of it if they want to, right? So really what we're doing is we're just moving it to the Linux Foundation so that it has like an open governance structure and it's not controlled by a company, but we are going to keep working on it and we're going to keep maintaining it. So it's not like we're keeping the burden of keeping it working and keeping it good and everything on ourselves. We're just moving it so that it's not technically controlled by a corporation.
Fair enough. I wasn't trying to say anything about like the other end of that is the responsibility of that is now being upheld by the Linux Foundation.
Yeah.
So the Linux Foundation is a particular organization that exists. It's basically from like Linus Torvald and the organization he was able to build. I don't really know much about it, and I think my next question and curiosity is like outside of the scope of the talk. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
No, that's all right. We'll come back to it afterwards, and I'll be curious to hear what it is.
We'll get a beer afterwards. I'll be around.
Yeah. So I am curious, based on that, though, like, what are your thoughts on where does the competitive edge lie? Does it lie in open source projects doing this because they have contributors from all around the world, or does it lie in closed source because they're collecting data and they have a profit incentive? Like, do you see yourselves as the underdogs here? Do you see yourselves like the inevitable victory just takes work?
I think each setup has advantages and disadvantages, right? So like a company in a for-profit corporation that's making a ton of profits can plow a lot of investment into a project. And that's always going to be valuable, and that's always going to be an advantage. What we have as an advantage if we go free and open with Goose is, in theory, like a much bigger audience and a much bigger user base of people using it, right? So that was the original motivation for open sourcing Goose. It was a decision made by our leader. It was made by Jack Dorsey. He wanted to open source Goose, and I asked him, I was just like, hey, like, what's the thinking? Because I can think of many reasons why you'd want to open source it. And one thing he shared with me is like, we will never get as much usage as if we make it like free and open, and that ultimately is going to come back and inform how we develop the product into something that's just like better and better for society. So that was his motivation, and that resonated with me.
Very cool. And when you say you won't get as much usage, do you mean from contributors or from the general user, or both?
Both.
Okay, interesting. Is there a fair analogy to make, like, between Linux and Windows, where I feel like the value of Linux is not just that it's available to everybody, but that applies pressure to private companies in order to use these open source tools and remain affordable and exert less control?
It's basically a perfect analogy. Yeah.
Okay.
And it also can serve as the basis for, like, Linux underpins and serves as the basis for many things that are paid products, right? People take Linux as a base and then they make it better in all kinds of ways and develop something that has value, and then they sell it. So it's like open source software both can just spread really wide and be a good social good, and then it can also serve as the basis for people who have really fantastic ideas for starting companies and doing commercial software, which is also great.
Yeah. And so, go ahead.
Do any of you have much thought on how to solve effectively like commons problems, tragedy of the commons problems when it comes to open source software?
Yeah, so tragedy of the commons kind of comes up in software projects, right?
And if you want to explain briefly what that is.
Yeah, maybe you take a stab at it so I can answer more to your concern.
Yeah, sure. To make it, I mean, tragedy of the commons is a thing abstractly, but to make it really practical, somebody who makes code needs to get paid and eat, and doing that never yields to money or food if you just give away your stuff for free, because it's kind of like publishing a book on free paper and giving it away to everybody into the wind.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the model that we have with Goose, or that we've had so far, and now I think it will change now that we've moved it to a foundation, but the model that we've had so far is basically like Block pays our salaries to work on this project, and it's a contribution, right? It's a contribution that Block wants to make to the open source ecosystem, because we have used a lot of open source software. We've also made a lot of open source software, and we just want to keep contributing something. So that's been like the motivation for a bunch of reasons. And Jack has basically decided like he'll continue to pay my salary while I work on Goose, even though it's not anything that Block's making any money from. So that is one model that I think can work. Like a for-profit company can fund a team of people to work on it. I also we're at an interesting moment.
Could I call that patronage?
Yes, yeah, like that patronage model. The other interesting thing that I would put forward though is that we're at a moment where the cost of producing software is going to change dramatically, right? So like we just saw that like with that demo that I did at the beginning of this of like make me a website that can be a booking system for PubKey. That happened in like 2 minutes, and it used maybe like I don't know, like fractions of a dollar worth of tokens, and so that, you know, what would that have cost even just to get to that state like a year and a half ago? What would that have cost from a contractor? Like probably quite a bit, right? So the cost of software is already, creating software and digital products is already plummeting, and I think that will just continue, and that's going to change the dynamics, and it's going to change that whole sector of the economy in dramatic ways that I don't think anybody can predict what's going to happen. But as a software engineer, I feel like I just, like the train's leaving the station, and I just need to learn these tools and participate in this revolution and see how far we can push it to like more and more powerful tools that can have everybody able to build what they want, right?
Off that theme, show of hands, out of curiosity, who here is familiar with Noster? Okay, that's more than I would have thought. That's very cool. And so I know you did, I believe, a panel with Alex Gleason, who's working on a tool on Noster. And it seems very in line with your ethos. Like Gleason's point is that as software becomes easier to make, it just makes sense to have it all exist hosted on an open protocol as well, so that anyone can easily make changes to any open source software. Do you have thoughts on like whether it's Nostr or another open source protocol where things are hosted? Does that tie in well, or are there obstacles with AI?
Yeah, I know like the high level contours of Nostr. I don't know the technical details of how it works, but I do think it's compelling, and I think the interesting problem that we have before us, or like opportunity that we have before us, is there's going to be a lot more software in the world, because it's going from this thing that was like very tightly supply constrained in terms of the number of people who create it to like everybody can make it now, and it can be made very cheaply, right? And the quality will just get better and better as it goes. So what we do with that and how we share all that software and how we distribute it around is a total open question. I think using something like Nostr to distribute it is an interesting experiment. We can see where it goes, but there may be other approaches and other protocols that emerge for sharing these things, and that it just like we can't see the future right now, but it's coming very soon.
Yeah. Do you think that will closed source companies almost be outcompeted just because if software is so easy to code, if you're trying to gatekeep it, no one's going to want anything to do with it?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I don't fully know the answer to it, but it's like, yeah, the cost of creating software and software itself, even like the agents, right? So sometimes we think about the project that we work on of Goose, which is like this open source project, which we think holds all this value, but it's getting, and it's useful to people, but it's getting possible to just generate agents that do the same thing in like minutes, right? So I don't know where it all goes, but it's just like we're on this sort of exponential curve of like how easy it is to create the kinds of software and digital products and digital experiences that we want to see in the world, and it's just like the downstream effects of that are just hard to see, but it does feel exciting, and there's a lot of opportunity and promise.
And to bring it back, do we have a question?
Yeah. I have one quick question. How do you, with Goose, do you have like a process for looking at diagnostics for like hallucination?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a diagnostic thing that we added actually not too long ago. It's only been about a month, but it's been really helpful, where anytime that something goes wrong with Goose, you can export a diagnostic package for like an individual. Say you were trying to vibe code with Goose and it didn't do something well. You can just click a button in the UI now to basically export like a zip file that has a bunch of files in it that are relevant to us. And if you send that diagnostics package to us, we can make sense of it. And usually we make sense of it by using Goose. So
one thing I've noticed is like I've worked on projects using an agent and vibe coding, and I've had like software friends look at it, and I've noticed when they're trying to teach me how to use it, they have to fight themselves not to refer me back to the code and like teach me how to code versus teaching me how to vibe code. Does that challenge exist within Goose of like software engineers making something that's not for software engineers and making it usable? Are you fighting your instincts there, or does it come naturally?
In terms of like the output, like the software that is created.
Yeah, the software,
like,
when you're creating software for the average person to use,
yeah.
does it come naturally to the team to make it so that they're not, the end user isn't having to code? Or are you trying to like fight the urge to teach them how to code and integrate these more advanced tools?
Well, I think what I mostly experience is I think is a downstream effect of the way that the current models work, which is that the current models, the big ones, right, the frontier ones from the leading AI companies, have been trained on massive, massive pre-training data sets. Like basically everything publicly available on the internet, every open source software project that's been published to the internet. And so when you ask for something, one behavior that you'll notice if you use these tools a lot is like if you ask for the same thing over and over, you get very similar results. Like if you ask it to visualize a soccer field or make a website that shows a hockey rink or something, and you do that 10 times in a row, it will look slightly different each time, but it will mostly look the same. And that's because the models have been trained on all past software projects. And so when it pattern matches and it figures out what you're asking for, and it kind of gives you like the best result that it can from its pre-training data set. And so they end up kind of feeling like almost like commoditized, right? Or like simple. And you kind of have to push harder to get to something that feels original and that feels unique. And that's like a challenge, I think, with the current tools, because you ask for a booking website, you get like a very generic feeling booking website. I don't know if that directly answers the question, but
It doesn't, but that's a whole another interesting area too.
Yeah.
Cool. So how far away do you think, based on your like specific work, not the industry at whole, is the average person here able to install Goose and use it right away, or is that already the case? Like, should anyone be looking at this now and be able to set it up?
yeah, I think so.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you get feedback from people in the main roadblock? Is it what you were saying, that it's giving them generic outputs, or is it something else?
I think one weakness that we have as Goose is it's both a strength and a weakness, that we're model neutral. So we don't control a way of getting you set up with a model like out of the box. So you have to have some way to access an AI model already. And I think that's the main roadblock that we need to smooth out for people, is like, it would be nice if you could just install Goose and like click a couple buttons and just pick your option for open source models and just have it kind of like work without you having to do anything. That's something that we're working on. But now you do have to have a previous connection to an AI model already working, and you have to know how you want to connect, and you have to configure that, and it's a little bit of a roadblock. So we'll fix that.
Gotcha. What makes like a terrible day working at Goose versus a great day? Like, what's something that goes wrong and you hate it versus a big win?
We had a really rough period for like a couple months I'd call it like between September, maybe like late August and like early October, where it was really interesting. It was kind of like a growing pains moment for the project. And what actually happened is we started to get so many contributions from people, code contributions, trying to do things like add new features to Goose or improve things or fix bugs in Goose, which is great. Like, it's a good problem to have people coming and wanting to work on the project. But two things happen. One, you have like a very high number of people who are not very familiar with the project, which always leads to like when you're new on a team or you're new on a project, you can make mistakes that you wouldn't make if you were more experienced. And the other thing is that in the age of vibe coding, like people are vibe coding new features for Goose itself using Goose. And the quality of the code that the vibe coding tools generates is not yet at the level that like a very experienced software engineer or a team of software engineers would build. And so sometimes it will do things it will duplicate code that already, like there's a solution for something already in Goose that we hope everything uses the same solution, and it'll do a second one or a third one. And so we actually like took on a ton of contributions and we added a ton of stuff to Goose, but the quality wasn't all very high. And so we spent a couple months really trying to like dig ourselves out from bug fixing, and this thing got broken in Goose and we have to fix it. And it was like a couple months of that. But I think we are now back at a much more stable place, and we have some ideas for how we can prevent that going forward. So
Very cool.
being able to actually do new stuff that we like, new ideas and innovative stuff, is the fun part. And cleaning up after stuff that got broken is the not fun part.
Checks out. Yeah. Any other? Yeah, we've got a question here.
Yeah, the last guy who came in and asked a question about hallucinations jogged my memory about what I meant by error propagation. Like errors at all levels. You kind of mentioned that the problems are now higher up the stack. That's almost kind of what I meant. And I've been more or less curious about the same thing all night, which is like, where is the originality coming from, and where is the impetus or the rest of that supported? And I think the question's actually like outside the bounds of the room though as well. I guess the question is like, the AI models. It seems like you have to understand already what you're trying to do and then be able to explain it out in more or less technical language already. So the AI gives everyone who knows what they're doing a team of experts to carry out their vision, and then everyone who does not have a vision is still completely lost.
Yeah, there's a couple approaches to solving this though. Like you kind of need to do like expert prompting to get good results with some of these tools, I think is another way of putting it. Is that fair? Like,
say that again? Expert prompting?
You have to do expert kind of level prompting to get great results for certain kinds of tasks. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, basically.
So there's a couple at least attempts to solve this, and we have a feature in Goose called recipes. So I can make a recipe, and a recipe is like a little configuration file, and you can extend the system prompt, and you can give like an initial prompt. So I can write something really long that's like, you are an investigator to do this kind of task, and you know you have a strong background in these fields, and you've studied all this, and I can do the prompting, and then I can distribute that recipe to you or anybody else, and then you can run Goose with that recipe active, and it makes it much better at solving certain kinds of challenges. So it's like a shared, and then Anthropic has one, Claude has a concept called skills, which is similar, where you can configure a skill, like you can give Claude a new skill, and then you can share a skill between, like I can send one to you and you can use your Claude with that skill active, and it all of a sudden becomes much better at doing something. And doing something like this in a shareable, like open way, I think is a cool idea.
Cool.
Yeah, agreed.
Question here.
This may be Goose specific or just your perspectives as a software engineer and where agentic AI is going. You may have seen an agentic browser by Perplexity called Comet. I was introduced to a couple of different tools when you mentioned the no keyboard vibe coding. And all those tools, when you dig into it using LLMs, they're either storing the data in a cloud. A lot of them will say, hey, we're taking screenshots of your entire screen for better context of what you're looking at to convert the speech to text better. With something like Comet, probably on your bank account page or you're on some sensitive information, there's no way for you to control that. Do you think there's ever a point where you can vibe code or develop some of these agents or tools from a productivity standpoint, but everything local on your machine versus it having to, go to third parties?
Yeah, an AI browser that's open and open source is a really big help wanted sign for somebody. I haven't seen one. I've seen Comet, and I think OpenAI has one as well, right? But yeah, it's ambitious. I mean, it's a big project to build a browser, but to do one that's open, maybe Chromium is open, and somebody could take that and build upon that to add agentic features, but have them run locally and have the implementation be open source. I think that'd be a great thing.
What about building specific agents? Maybe the browser's too broad of a task, but let's take an example of a productivity agent where it's a plugin on your like a Chrome extension, and it can see exactly what page you're on. You can interface directly with the agent to summarize the content on the page, summarize the video, or look at your calendar real time and do bookings. I'm just making up use cases, but all of those have significant privacy trade-offs where you're trusting this agent to constantly scan everything that's on your computer screen.
Yeah.
And I was just curious if that just right now, the way your understanding of these models and agents work, that's a really hard barrier to overcome, or do you think there is a pathway to get that to be more localized, where if you have a powerful enough server or hardware, you can do those things locally?
Yeah, I think you could do it locally. I mean, part of the beauty of an open source project like Goose, and this is the whole reason for it, right, is that anybody with an idea can come and implement this. So somebody could come to Goose and implement a new client for the Goose agent, which is an open source Chrome extension, or something that could interface with the Goose agent also running on your machine. One of my colleagues did a mobile app. So we just have desktop and command line that's worked on like computers until now, and he did a mobile application that connects to the Goose agent that's also in an open source project. So there's no reason why a Chrome extension couldn't also be a client of the agent. Yeah, so that's something that come build it. Use Goose and build it.
So I think we'll open it up to any more questions, and then we'll close it out with final thoughts. So if anyone has any questions for Alex, myself, or on any of the subjects, now would be the time. Yeah.
So like, you know the program CapCut? It's made by like the TikTok people. It's like a video editing program.
I haven't seen it. What's it called?
It's called CapCut.
Okay.
No, I haven't heard of it either.
No shill or anything, but it does have one feature that I like, and that it's like when you can optimize your computer to, you know what I mean, like how good your computer is to being able to use it. So I find that, you know what I'm saying, with like these new like vibe coding, self-coding tools, is there any diagnostic for like, I would love to be able to download Goose and then just be like, how much can I make? I know what I can do. You know what I mean? So like prioritizing my CPU and stuff.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like giving you like an optimal setup for the laptop that it's been downloaded on is an interesting idea. Yeah, and something that we would definitely consider. I think we're looking at a mode that's kind of like a zero configuration to getting a good local open source model running, where you just like, there's a new mode, and this is in draft. The code is coming together for this. But the idea would be that you'd like open Goose for the first time, you've never used it before, and you see like a list of the open source models that you could run locally, and you just click one and it downloads it and does everything you need to do. And there's no reason why we couldn't look out and inspect various things about your computer, like see how much memory you have and see how much of CPU, what chip you're working with, and make a good decision about which model to choose. So yeah, this is something we could absolutely make part of that change.
I guess the reason why I'm asking is because it's like optimization is like a triangle, it's like an arrow, you know what I mean? So it's like, I guess the point of this access would be like knowing how much you can do with the type of agent. So it's like, as people are progressing and making things like code basing, it's like, okay, I'm making this type of thing over and over and over again, and I have this type of computer. So it's like I can optimize how many times I can make that exact thing once I know how exact it is. So it's the more exact that I get while I'm learning, I'm also getting, like, I'm cleaning my dishes while I'm washing, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think we can all expect more and more over time as well. So the curve is like moving really fast of what you're able to achieve with these AI tools on a given piece of hardware. Like 6 months ago, it basically was not possible to have any AI model that was capable of calling tools reliably on a laptop. And then it was like 3 months after that, they were a lot better. And today they're a lot better. And we're almost at the point, I think, where on consumer hardware, you can have open source models that can let you do something like vibe coding. And I think once we get there, that will be a huge moment, because that means that you can basically have like AI to help you make something, create something in a box in like one package that you can just install. You don't even need an internet connection. You don't need anything. You can just create this stuff on a MacBook or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's incredible, and that helps the privacy problem a lot.
Tremendously.
Wow. We had a question in the back.
Just building off of the hardware piece, right? Because we know FOSS, free open source software, doesn't mean that things are actually free in the implementation stage, right? Like there will take some pieces, some hardware to be used. Do you think that this is where public and or private entities can be used in a more philanthropic way to make donations of laptops or old tech that they are no longer using in order to help usher in the wave of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And in AI, one thing that people spend a tremendous amount of money and resources on is inference compute, right? So there's training compute where you're trying to build a big AI model and you're hoovering up all the data available on the internet that you can get for its training data set. And you're a multi-month process where somebody's training a big model. That's a lot of compute. But much of the compute in these big organizations, AI organizations, is actually earmarked for inference, which is like when a user comes to ChatGPT and asks a question, it costs compute resources to answer that question and to stream the result down, or to do vibe coding or to do any kind of use of AI. And yeah, I think the idea of like having donated philanthropic resources of compute, inference compute, like somebody who would be willing to host very capable, big capable models and just make the processing free so that you had like a remote source that you could connect to where you could get really high quality results from a model, that would be great. That would be like a tremendous social good if somebody was willing to pour money into that.
Funny enough, HRF has gotten that suggestion before for AI program to like help solicit that donation.
Just host the big open source models and make it free.
Yeah. Awesome. Any further questions? It can be as basic as you want. We've had like more complex ones, but it can be as simple as like, what website do I go to start trying this out, or whatever you like. Which is a good question. What website should we go to start trying this out?
Yeah, right now you should go to Block, Goose, GitHub. That's where you'll still find it. We haven't moved it yet. We're going to move it to the AIF, the Agentic AI Foundation website, but that's all in progress right now.
Great. Okay, so for closing thoughts, I thought it'd be interesting. You said something earlier, which was we were at the AI for Individual Rights Summit, which HRF, it's a private event we host. We bring together developers and activists and people who want to make these tools like work for freedom. And you mentioned one of your takeaways was how this might empower like the individual and the dissident more than the authoritarian. If you have thoughts on that and anything else you want to close out with.
Yeah, something very inspirational that your colleague Alex said to me when we were there is that if you think about an authoritarian ruler in an authoritarian country, like they don't need this, right? They don't need vibe coding. They don't need an agent to go like build software for them or do something. They have control of all the resources they need to do something like that already. But who does it benefit? The citizen, right? Who has an idea, who wants to build something, who wants to organize, who wants to communicate, who wants a better tool for doing something. It's like, if we do it right, this technology can be a really leveling force in the world, right? Like an amplification of individual power. And I think that that's something to always keep in our minds as we're building these systems and try to aim for a good result.
Totally. And to your point earlier, you know, you're the ones that are doing it right. So thank you for doing that. And thank you everyone for coming out.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll be around. Come find us if you have any more questions, and we'll grab a drink. Thomas, any closing thoughts?
No, I think we still have some space on the Fold tab this evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Obviously, we're going to take a break with the holidays. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas. We're going to have a full slate kicking off again in January. Also, be on the lookout. If you're ever in D.C., we have a full slate happening there, too. I'm actually heading down tomorrow, and we open to the public on Friday, so I hope to see everybody there. Tip your bartenders. See you soon.
Thank you.